in the room. Thanks so much. Question to start us off. Did you know that a recent study found that 80% of employees left a job not because of the work itself, but because of a bad boss? Another study found that 70% of employees reported feeling lower feelings of self-worth, lower feelings of self-esteem and self-confidence as a result of their immediate supervisor. And what I found as I've been crisscrossing the country over the last several years since I left frontline dispatch, I found that the very best comm centers in this state and across the country embody a different approach to leadership. So if the statistics say anything, it is that leadership matters a great deal. And based on my research and conversations that I've had with literally thousands of folks who work in our industry, it's not just the formal leaders at the center that make a difference. It's actually everybody who shows up like a leader. And so today's conversation is about frontline leadership. It is through frontline leadership that the best 911 centers inspire positive change. And so as you're joining today, you may say, well, I don't know about this whole leadership conversation. I'm just a call taker. I'm just a dispatcher. And from my experience working in the center, I worked at the LAPD. I was one of 700 line level dispatchers there in communications division. I found that, yes, the 60 supervisors, the cadre of 60 supervisors, their leadership approach mattered a great deal. But so too did the approach of everyone on the line. And it wasn't until I had kind of a coming to Jesus epiphany in my own career as a dispatcher that I found that I could be more like a leader. So what I'd like you to consider as we go through the conversation today is how can you take what we're going to be discussing, no matter where you are in the organization, and apply it to the way you show up on a daily basis. I'd like you to be thinking about that. Also, I encourage you to take notes. I encourage you to write stuff down. I don't care if you have questions or if you think you have a silly answer to a question. I'm also encouraging you to participate. There is a chat window. I will be referencing the chat window. There is also a raise hand feature on the participant window. If you're not familiar with Zoom, you can raise your hand. So when you raise hand, when I ask for someone to raise their hand, you can put your hand up and I will call on you. This is an interactive participatory experience. For those of you who've been in my sessions at conference or my training classes, you know the drill. So I'm inviting you into the conversation. I'm inviting you to write things down. I'm inviting you to take something out of our conversation today and do something with it. Sound cool? Awesome. Awesome. Let's bring up my presentation here. So I'd like you to consider the challenges that we face. I'd like you to consider the challenges that we face as an industry, the challenges we face in the comm center, you face in your role. And this could be on a call-by-call basis. This could be in a person-to-person exchange with some of your fellow coworkers. When you think about the challenges that we face, which are many, aside from the pandemic, aside from the protests, aside from civil unrest, aside from the heavily charged political atmosphere that surrounds us all, the challenges are many. And especially when it comes to the challenges that you deal with at the center, have you ever seen this happen? Where everyone's saying, someone should really do something about things around here, but that's above my pay grade. I get paid the same whether I'm nice to people or not. So what's the point? Those supervisors, those trainers, if the culture of your center is such that there's a lot of finger pointing and not a lot of accountability, not a lot of ownership, I would encourage you to think about how you might be able to do something. How you think about what you could own, because while you don't have to have a formal leadership title to make a difference, you certainly cannot make a difference unless you start thinking about what that looks like for you in your role, if you agree with me. All of the challenges that we face add up to what you see here. Most centers across the country are stuck in this cycle of dissatisfaction. This is the cycle of employee dissatisfaction. And these three factors are based on the industry literature, the APCO and NINA studies, based on my conversations with center staff all around the country. I find that these three variables are dynamically intertwined. So your staffing situation, whether your center is fully staffed, leads to more or less overtime, which when it's more overtime, it leads to a greater level of dissatisfaction with working conditions, which causes people to leave, which negatively impacts your staffing situation, which causes more overtime. And so many centers across the state are circling the drain, not knowing what to do. And if your center is in a similar place, I have a tremendous amount of compassion and empathy for the state of the industry. However, it's not new. APCO declared a staffing crisis in 1999 when they commissioned their Project Retains investigation, which resulted in the 2005 Effective Practices Guide, which was followed by a 2009 update and a 2018 update. I don't know if you're familiar with these studies, but the 2018 update showed that things have gotten worse. Amidst business as usual, there are centers that have opted for a different approach. They have opted to jump out of the cycle and do something novel. They've decided that, we can't keep putting our head in the sand and avoiding the necessary conversations, which might be as simple as holding each other accountable for the way we do things around here. That's one thing that we can all do better, is committing to having more frequent, difficult conversations and getting better at doing that. So thinking about the challenges that your center faces in particular, I would like you to consider, what might you be able to do? What might you be able to take out of this presentation and bring back to your center? More appropriately, what would you need to take out of the presentation? What would you need to take out of the conversation that we're having right now in order for it to be worth it for you to be here? And you think about your leadership role. If you're in a formal leadership role, you think about the challenges that your center faces. If you're experiencing these challenges, you think about the challenges that you face on a daily basis individually. What would it mean to be more like a leader? And keeping that in mind is the biggest challenge. Because I know a lot of folks who go to conferences, virtual or in person, when they were a thing, and they get super fired up. They sit in a breakout session, something resonates with them, and they go, this is the message that I've been waiting for. I am going to go back and do something about the way things have always been. That's just the way we've always done it. That doesn't cut it anymore. Inevitably, that motivation, that spark, lasts for anywhere from 24 hours to 2 weeks. Because when you get back to your center, when you go back to the floor, since you're probably beaming in from your center or from home, we realize how difficult it is to change things. And the reason is because your current reality, meaning the way things are today, are you aware of how your values show up in the way you work on a daily basis? One of my mentors in this profession, um, the way that she demonstrates her emotional intelligence is by, first of all, she spends 5 hours each month working the floor. She's executive director of a huge team out in North Carolina. She works the floor 5 hours each month because she knows that she has to come down from on high and work with her people. She has to talk to people. She has to get to know the ship through her crew's eyes. Um, and she also prides herself on getting to know something personal about every one of her employees. And when I first learned that about this executive director, it blew me away. I said, wait. You know something personal about all of your employees? She said, yeah, that's my job. I said, how many employees do you have? She said, I have 145 full-time employees. I said, you know something personal about all 140 of your employees that work 24/7? She said, yeah. That to me speaks of emotional intelligence. Why do you think she takes the time to get to know all of her people, all 140 employees, and knows something personal about all 140 of her employees? Why do you think she prioritizes the time and effort it requires to do that? Looking for some feedback in the chat window. If you would like to unmute yourself and come up on the air, you're welcome to do that as well. Why do you think this emotionally intelligent leader would take time to get to know all of her employees personally? Thank you, Brenda, so that your staff can see you as a human instead of a monument. I love that. To let them know that she cares. Wonderful. Tim, you got the floor. Go ahead. Why do you think that's important?
Oh, I couldn't even, it's funny. I always think back to when I was brand new, to have a leader that high up, care enough, because every time they see you, they would tell you, hey, how are you doing, Tim? Hey, how are you doing, Cindy? And actually know something about you. And yeah, I think it's a cornerstone of being a supervisor. You have to take that time. You got to get to know these people. And I've learned over the years, because we flush through a lot of people. We have this constant flow of folks in and out. And if you miss it in those first few months, it is tough to get back. Like, if I don't get to that person and get to know them, if I go to them 8 months, 9 months down the road, it is so hard to build a decent relationship. But if you get them in those first few months and try to create some type of a, community or friendship, oh, you're golden for years.
So true. I love that, and thank you for sharing that story and that perspective as well. Um, how can you know what people are thinking and feeling unless you get to know people? That's really the end all be all there. Also, from a line level perspective, or from a perspective of doing the work, I mean, we're working in emotionally charged situations. We're working in a pressure cooker situation of the comm center with 2 to 5 to at LAPD. We had 40 to 50 people on the dispatch floor, and if I'm not dealing with my stuff and someone else isn't dealing with their stuff, then we have the potential for a blow up. We have a potential for an erosion of service levels. We have the possibility of something going sideways, and it's all emotional content. So here's the competencies I mentioned earlier. What I'd like you to consider is, where is your bleeding edge personally? What are you best at, and where is one of your improvement areas? Most of us can be much better when it comes to social awareness, which is comprised of the skills of empathy, organizational awareness, and a service orientation, as well as relationship management. especially if you're in a formal leadership role. Relationship management is super, super important, which boils down to inspiring and empowering others, developing others, influencing them, being a change catalyst, managing conflict effectively. And I found that the most emotionally intelligent leaders have the ability to build bonds of teamwork and collaboration, especially in the midst of conflict. Think about that. What are you most concerned with when you're triggered, when you're wading into a conflict? And if you are like I was for years in the comp center, it was my need to be right. And I had to put that aside if I was going to keep my job. Like things got so bad for me. And my third sustained citizen complaint got me unpaid suspension days. And what I was being told in no uncertain terms is if you don't change your ways, you're not going to work here anymore. And you might be thinking, well, you probably would have done well to get out of there, especially for the sake of your fellow employees. And I might agree with you, but I didn't have any other prospects. I was making good money 7 years into the whole thing, and so I was forced to see, okay, I am not part of the solution here. I'm part of the problem, and I found that working on me was enough. Now, from emotional intelligence, I find that the best leaders in our profession are really clear about their values. They're clear about the values that animate how they show up. They live in accordance to these values. And this is really the context of your why. What is your bigger why? Why did you choose to sign up for this job? Why do you choose to show up each day? And if you're like me, it's a winding, twisting path that landed you in the communications center. I don't know many people who grew up and they're second, third generation dispatchers. Most people kind of found it. They were hiring. Like I found my city job with the city of Los Angeles because the starting pay was decent and my current job sucked. So I made it 10 months later to the job offer, and now I'm a 911 dispatcher. But it was really important for me to understand why I continued to show up each day. And that helped me be more resilient. It helped me understand that it wasn't about me. Because your inspiring values flow through your personal mission, purpose, vision. And if you're not clear about your values, it's difficult to do this job day in and day out. And even more importantly, clear about how your values show up and animate your goals and objectives, both personally and professionally. The best leaders are really clear about this. The best leaders lead from their values and through their values, and they are not scared to share their values or their vision for the future with others. Is your vision worth catching? Is your vision an animating force? Is it something that others can rally around? The best teams share a vision. The best teams understand that we all have to be part of the same mission, purpose, and vision. One person can't go doing whatever they think the values mean, the core values, if you have core values for your center, because there's no unification. So from values, the best leaders, and there's a flow of each of these. They kind of build on and inform each other. So from values, we have to begin to clearly articulate our expectations. So by being emotionally attuned, we can get really clear about our values and our vision. And then we have to start holding people accountable for living up to those expectations. We have to start holding ourselves accountable, taking ownership for our role in the way things are. And only through clearly communicated expectation can this chain of accountability pay dividends. And if you know anything about organizational culture, I've gotten really, really curious about what organizational culture is and why so many centers in this country have what you could call low morale and a negative culture. And I think we can all agree that positive culture brings positive results, negative culture brings negative results. And so once we determine, hey, we need to change aspects of our culture because it's not getting us what we want, that's a start, but it's super complicated because organizational culture is a collection of the mindsets and beliefs and behaviors that we as a group, meaning the team in the center, have come to take for granted. That's why it's culture. It's simply the way we do things around here. So if you say, okay, our culture doesn't work because we have this vision. So we've rekindled our awareness of our values, and we've shaped a vision and some goals and objectives that will lead us to the achievement of that vision. But the culture is not leading us there. What do we do then? Well, if you don't start having accountability conversations and holding people accountable for bad behavior, that means this chain is broken. One of the links of the chain is weak. And what happens is you become what you tolerate. So much of the bad behavior that's tolerated in our centers all across the state are because, and the country, I know that there's some folks from out of California here on in the group today. So much of the bad behavior that we tolerate is adding up to the result of a negative or bad culture. And we've simply said, we've always done things like this. So what's the point? Well, they're a supervisor. What am I supposed to do? Well, we don't have any support from the command staff. I feel like we're just, and that's the question I'll ask you. What can you do when it comes to clearly communicating your expectations? What can you do to, insofar as holding people accountable? What can you do around defining the roles and responsibilities for your positive change initiative, if that's what you're looking for? So getting more and more clear about how what you say is possibly not in alignment with how you say it can help. Having more frequent one-on-one conversations with your fellow team members can help. Meeting more frequently with your team and soliciting feedback can help. I find that we are so busy just doing the work that is 911 work that we're just getting sucked into the future, and we forget to have intentional and constructive conversations around where we're at and where we want to be. The best centers were not always that way. And in my book, I've chronicled, about 30 different case studies where an incoming director said, hey, things are not good here, but I don't know how we're going to change things. I need to source that from my new team. And that's what they spent the first several weeks in their new role doing, that sitting down with all the employees one-on-one saying, hey, I just want to introduce myself. Tell me a little bit about yourself and where you think we're at and where we need to go. And for many of those at the center, at these centers where the new director took over, they had never spoken to whoever occupied that highest leadership spot. Kind of like Timm was saying, like the executive directors never came down from on high to speak with the commoners. And so that was a step in the right direction. And one director in particular, director out of Michigan, the story in what they continue to create there. He took over in 2014 at a center that was doing minimum staffing. So they had 14 people doing the work of 23 budgeted positions for years because no one wanted to work at the center. And he came in, sat down with all 14 employees one-on-one, said, "Hey, I just want to let you know I'm here to change things." And they all went, "Yeah, sure. Yeah, whatever." Because they were beat down. They in fact, I asked several of the employees during that time, like, "Why did you stick around?" And one of the employees said, "Well," she's the ops manager now. She said, "Well, we most of us were single mothers, and we knew that if we didn't come into work, the person sitting alongside of us would have to work a 16-hour shift or a double shift and not be able to see their family or kids. And so we just banded together." So a new director comes in and says, "I'm going to change things." And he painted a very clear vision. And he was very, very clear about what he expected of the team. But then he stepped back. He said, "Here's the vision. Here's what we expect. I don't know how we're going to get there, but I know we can do it together." And then he just stepped back and he watched things work. And since that time, like, it took them a year to get fully staffed, which was, I mean, amazing considering that they had been minimum staff for almost a decade. And then the 911 board gave them 2 more bodies. And just last year, this is a center or an agency. It's a consolidated center. They do police, fire, and EMS. This is an agency that had previously, before this director came in, had no money for positive changes. Just last year, they broke ground on a $3.7 million communications center. And I believe that they're staffing now up to 40 employees. And it all came about because someone dared to have difficult conversations. Someone dared to draw a line in the sand. Someone dared to share a vision. Someone dared to hold people accountable and articulate clear expectations. Someone dared to source, where do we need to go, from the rest of the team. And we can all be part of this. One of the best feedback mechanisms that most centers have is the quality assurance program. There is one way to use quality assurance effectively. There is another that isn't so effective. And the best centers use the quality assurance program to catch people doing good. That's their primary focus, is to catch people doing well and to offer improvement points. Whereas at other centers, quality assurance program has a different effect. It tears people down. It furthers the us versus them culture. And so if you do have a quality assurance program, being really clear about how you're using it can help shape culture. Also, if you don't have a quality assurance program, I encourage you to develop some regular feedback mechanism, because nothing demoralizes team members more than not knowing where they stand, not hearing anything. We are, for the most part in this profession, type A overachievers. I don't know any type A overachiever who doesn't want to achieve and become better at their craft. Feedback is the way that we help people improve. From clear expectations, then we commit to excellence. And committing to excellence is really about saying, okay, we've solved these problems. Where else do we need to apply this focus? The best centers don't just rest on their laurels. After they've solved one problem, they don't say, all right, great. Our annual turnover last year was 5%. We're just going to be good with that. They work on another thing and another thing and another thing. In fact, even if you do find that your turnover for the last year is very, very low, first of all, congratulations. It means you're doing something right. But if you don't keep working at it, and there are several centers in this state that didn't keep working at it after they achieved their goal of very low turnover, when the people who were in leadership, the formal leadership roles who ushered in that state change left, they took with it the organizational knowledge that was required to sustain that retention rate. So you got to keep talking about it. You got to keep iterating. You got to keep on this continuous improvement cycle. I'd like you to consider right now, and I'd like you to write this down. What is some area of your center's operation that is in need of attention, that is in need of a proactive solution? Maybe it's something that you've worked on before and you've notched some gains. What can take you to the next level? How can you commit to excellence around that particular challenge? I also encourage you to reach outside of your center. The fact that you're part of NAPCO, CAPRA, there's also the national agency, or the national levels of the chapters, the APCO and NINA chapters. Reach out to others at different centers. They have likely come through similar challenges and can help. Hey, Tim, nice to have you here. Finally, we can't get anything done without trust. The best leaders inspire trust. The best leaders are trusted because the way that they show up each and every day. And we can't take action without having a unifying force that brings us all together. We can't do this tough job without trusting that the person next to you and the person behind you and the person in front of you has your back. The best leaders inspire this by practicing professionalism, by practicing sincerity, by practicing consistency on a regular basis. Without trust, you have some of the challenges that have just come to be known as the way things are in our profession. What's something that you might be able to do to foster greater levels of trust and camaraderie? I think we take it for granted that we work together in a tight little space that is the communication center, and that we are thereby a team. Teams do not happen by accident. It takes conscious and deliberate effort to foster a team dynamic. And only by having conversations, only by having a leader who's aligned with this, and that, again, the informal leaders, as you mentioned, Lena, the informal leaders may have more power and control than even the formal leaders. How can you bring them on board with what needs to happen? At Polk County Sheriff's in 2010, Ivan Whitaker was the incoming executive director. And what he did was something really amazing. When he sat down with all 145 employees within the first three weeks or so to get a feeling for what people thought about work, which was not good, by the way. During those conversations, he noticed that there was about 10% of the total population, so about 12 to 14 employees, who were the most vocally negative. And he also noticed that those were the most tenured folks, and they were seen as the informal leaders on the floor. Some of them were supervisors, most of them were not. And what he did, part of his change initiatives, part of fostering ownership and buy-in up and down and across the organization, was he created a series of committees. And one of the committees that he formed was the morale committee. And he invited the most vocally negative 10% who had basically self-selected, and he had determined were that way in his one-on-ones. He went to them, each of them, and he said, hey, in our conversation, I noticed that you know what's wrong with this place. Won't you be on the morale committee to help make things right. And he also promised them, he said, I promise you, if you develop workable solutions, if you develop policies and procedures to address the most glaring concerns, the concerns and the challenges that people care most about, that is leading to negative culture, that you will work in tandem with the Policy and Procedure Committee and we will make it policy. And that's what happened. The Morale Committee worked in tandem with the Policy and Procedure Committee, and they fashioned policies and procedures, a strategy for changing culture. And he said, Adam, once the Policy and Procedure Committee gave me the policies and procedures, I did a once over, sent them to legal, and they became policy. Talk about ownership and buy-in in the process. Now, this was an outsider coming in. And he knew that, A, he could not change things by himself, and it would be futile to try. Second of all, he probably couldn't change anything as an outsider with that bad situation. And he shouldn't try without the help of other people. So here's some questions. Here's some questions that can help kind of point you in the right direction of the most highly leveraged activities that can change things for the better. Not everything is equal when it comes to your daily responsibilities. Not everything has the same amount of weight. At the worst centers, those who occupy leadership roles spend 80% of the time dealing with the 20% of things that matter the least to the people in the center. In our industry, as a rule, we don't do a very good job prioritizing people. At the best centers, however, the leaders spend 80% of their time prioritizing their people. They're highly attuned to this, and it takes all of these characteristics working in tandem. I would be remiss to say that if you didn't also take care of yourself, you got to take great care of yourself because stress impacts all of these dimensions of your being. Then I would be leaving something out. If you want to talk more about stress resilience, I'll be back tomorrow to do a whole session on it. But just you got to take great care of yourself. This in itself is a personal leadership approach. So where do you need to change in order for things to change? That really is the question. And as you practice these pillars for successful leadership, you hone your ability to be centered and grounded so that you can be more emotionally intelligent. When you're stressed, your emotional intelligence goes out the window. And you begin to take action and you begin to involve others in your process, it will change things. And as you change one thing, it builds momentum. And as momentum builds, you have the power to change more and more. And then you have to measure it. How will you measure your success? How will you measure the success of your efforts? And there's some clear metrics that you can use. Turnover rate is a good metric. Call service levels is a good metric. Sick time use is a good metric. There's a whole set of key performance indicators that focus specifically on the human factor. If you would like to learn more about those, you can certainly shoot me an email. I can help with those. So what are you committing to? What are you committing to today to doing so that you can be part of the change at your center? I would love to get a couple of shares here. What are you committing to? Where are you most, or where is your center most in need of a positive change? And what could you personally commit to so that's possible? What do you think? Want to get a couple of shares here in the window. What's something that you personally could commit to so that positive change is a possibility at your center? And this could be personal or organizational. As we wait for some shares there, I will say that if you simply dare to tell a new story, it can make a huge difference. As I said, every positive change initiative that I've chronicled began with someone daring to say, the status quo here no longer works for us. And they got busy. They got busy going to work. Thank you, Jennifer. Being open to feedback from subordinates. That's a very emotionally intelligent thing to do. Several of the supervisors that I've spoken with who exemplify this emotional intelligence, after every single one of their one-on-one meetings with team members, they say, before I let you go, is there anything that I might be able to do for you to be a better supervisor for you? And then they actively listen and they take that feedback to heart. What questions do you have about anything? It is not easy. Thanks, Tim. It's not easy at all. What questions do you have about anything that we talked about today? I know that we missed out on a few minutes together because of the application crash, but we still have a few seconds for questions. Last thing I will do, if there are no questions, point you in the direction of a few different resources. If you didn't know, this is my third book, People-Driven Leadership, How the Best 911 Centers Inspire Positive Change. You can learn more about the 5 key characteristics and a bunch of stories directly from our industry. All of John Gordon's book, this is one of them, The Power of Positive Leadership, but all of his books are fantastic and super applicable to life in the comm center, as well as It's Your Ship. Captain Abershoff in this book talks about seeing the ship through your crew's eyes, which is so important, is really like getting to know what people think and feel about things. Finally, thanks so much for being here. Thanks so much for joining me for the last hour. If you have any questions, comments about anything that we talked about, please send me an email right there. If you want to learn more about Rapid Deploy, I can help you with that as well. Anything else? If there is nothing else, thanks, Tim. Thanks for being here, Tim Davidson. And Tim, I will throw to you as the MC.